Hello, everyone. Welcome to our special evening of 7 over 70 celebration. So the 3 people before you, and hopefully before the end of the evening, we'll have 2 additional members. They're just running a little late. I know one that's just running a little late. So the 7 over 70 awards started as a partnership between the Winston-Salem Journal and Spark Magazine and Cedar Services. And they decided that there were lots of people who were being recognized for the 40 under 40 through the Business Journal or through the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce, but some of the most impactful people in our community are actually over the age of 70. So they created this award, and the first one was in 2016. They chose 7 people from a large group of people. As you can imagine, there are so many people in our community over the age of 70 that have had an impact in our community, which is wonderful why they do this, continue to do this year after year. So as someone who has been involved with the organization, these are 3 of our recipients of the 7 over 70 award. Carl, you are 2017? 16. Oh, so the inaugural class.
Right.
And Amatula, you were as well.
Yes.
And then Ms. Clifford, you were from this year's class.
That's right.
And then we have Claudette Winston, who I believe was in year 2, 2017. And so she should be here hopefully shortly. But we wanted to talk tonight to these wonderful people. As part of Venture Cafe, we talk about, how to start a business and how to be an entrepreneur and have that entrepreneurial mindset. But we also want you to be community oriented and give back to the community. And if you are starting a business in your community, you need to know the community in which you're starting a business. So whether you're an entrepreneur or you are an entrepreneur who works for another organization and are helping make that organization better, after you hit that wonderful age of retirement, and also way before, you have an opportunity to give back into this community through mentorship, through volunteerism. And so one of the reasons that we asked this year's, or tonight's recipients to come in was to kind of inspire you and show you the different ways that you can give back in our community. So first on the program, it has everyone's bio, but Carl Yanna retired from RJR Nabisco in January of 1998 as a director of worldwide organization development and training. More than 20 of his 33 years were at a senior level management, providing consulting services to RJR corporations. But he has been a consultant for over 100 nonprofits in our community. Annually. Wow. I don't even know how to process that. But in education and health, municipalities, human services, churches, arts. So I'm assuming you don't sleep, but this is just a perfect example of how you can give of your time. Flip the sheet over so we can go in order. Ms. Dean Clifford, throughout her life, she has done a lot of volunteering, served on boards of family services and the ICANN House. The ICANN House is a nonprofit organization that works with people who are on the autism spectrum. Was a teacher, curriculum developer, guidance counselor, bless your heart, and former teacher, and educational consultant for early childhood programs. And then Amatula was born in Winston-Salem, and in one of the things that Mary Glenn and I had to do was take the resumes and information that we learned about tonight's panelists and find a way to shrink it down so that we could fit them onto this sheet of paper. But she saw film with her mother when she was a child of a dancer. and then ended up dancing in that dance company, correct?
Yes, I worked in a company.
And now is a community member in the Happy Hill neighborhood of Winston-Salem, which is just east of like UNCSA area, just east of Main Street. And she and her daughter run an arts summer camp.
Oh, it's not my daughter.
Oh, it's not your daughter.
We do have a summer camp in the last 3 years.
Wonderful. So I have some prepared questions, but then at the end of the prepared questions, we definitely want you to use this opportunity to ask these mentors of our community to about what it is that you want to know and how you can become more involved. So my first question is, when did Winston-Salem become your home? Matula, we'll start with you.
Well, I was born in Winston-Salem, 1931. And I lived just down the street. My grandmother's house was on First Street and Linden. And I went to school here, elementary school. It was Woodlawn Street Elementary School, and then it was changed to Brown Elementary School. They changed the name. I lived here until I was about 7. And then my grandmother and my mother joined the Great Migration North for many reasons. One was my grandmother. At that time, R.J. Reynolds was opening up the factories. So many of the Black people were getting jobs for the first time that paid them good money, and they were able to educate their children and buy homes. Reynoldstown was becoming the new home for the new employees of Reynolds. They moved from this area down here, right next to the factories, further out to Reynoldstown. What else would you like to know? I mean, what?
And so then you lived elsewhere north, but then you came back.
Right, we moved. I went north. My grandmother and I moved to Washington, D.C. I lived there, went to school there for 2-3 years. Then my mother married again. My mother had already moved to Harlem in New York. She married, and I moved to Brooklyn, New York. So I went to school in Brooklyn, New York also. My career really began when I saw a movie called Cabin in the Sky. You may have seen that movie. It's an old movie with Lena Horne and jazz, the trumpet player. Anyway, it was full of black stars.
Dizzy Gillespie?
No, way before that. God, I can't remember his name. Anyhow, I had never seen Black people in a movie dancing, and I realized, you can get paid to do that. So that kind of sparked my desire to be a dancer. And then from that movie was a woman called Catherine Dunham. And she opened a school in New York, right off Broadway. And I saved my money and went to her school and started learning to dance. But it's more than learning to dance. It changed my whole life, because Brooklyn was just a neighborhood like any neighborhood down here. But when you go from Brooklyn to Manhattan, where you have movies and stars and Broadway and the Greenwich Village and Soho and all this, it changed my life. So I left, my friends didn't want me to go, but I said, no, I found something different, something new, and I want it. And I studied until about 3 or 4 years. And then my friends and I realized it's very difficult to get onto Broadway. There are very few Black people on Broadway. So we decided to go to Europe. We saved our money, and at the time, it was easier or cheaper to go by cargo boat. That's what we found. So we decided we'll take a cargo boat. A cargo boat will take cargo, but it also takes 25 to 30 passengers. So we got on a cargo boat and went to Rome. Landed in Naples, took a train to Rome, and that started my career as a dancer. That's the first time I danced and really got paid for it. I stayed in Europe for maybe the first time 2 or 3 years. I came back to the United States, and it seemed like the more things changed, the more they were the same. So I went back to Europe. I stayed another 2 or 3 years and danced in almost every country in Europe, because as a dancer, you have to sign contracts, you have to move, you have to go where there's work. Our base was Paris, and from Paris we went to Switzerland, Italy, Spain, London. You learn the world, and it was more than just, I now realize it was much more than just a dance career, because you begin to meet people who have a different culture, a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing you, and you begin to see yourself differently. So I stayed in Europe for about 16 years. I came back in the 70s, I believe. Yeah, 60s, 70s, 60s. And I stayed in New York a while. Then I got a letter from my uncle who lives here in Winston-Salem. And he said, would you like to come to Winston-Salem to work as a dance music specialist? I said, wow, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm a performer, but I don't know about doing dance music specialist. But I did. I came to Winston, and I worked for the Arts Council and the Winston-Salem Recreation Department, which meant they had already had a plan that I would go around to all the different recreation centers and teach dance. Getting back to being an entrepreneur, how I became an entrepreneur, that's how it started. It begins with each person perhaps differently. That's how I started. I also went back, one of those times I went back to New York and I got a college degree. That helped me to have another mindset of ownership. So you begin to think about not just being a member of a working group or company. You want to own the company. You want to be another bracket of life. There are workers, laborers, and then you have the proprietors. So sometimes you might want to move up. Right now, I'm working with children in the Happy Hill community, and that's one of the things we want to get them to see. You may be in poverty now, but you can get out of it. And you can't wait for somebody to take you out of it. You have to start learning and gathering information, listening, and finding ways to get out of poverty. And one of the ways to get out of poverty is being an entrepreneur, having a business, knowing how to make something and sell it. So my entrepreneurship is not a product, a tangible product, but it has to deal with yourself, because you've got to first find out what values do you have. And sometimes our school systems fail to do that. They fail to teach our children the many qualities and talents they have. So right now what I'm doing is trying to reach children to let them know you can be an entrepreneur. You can be that person on television, not just singing a song. You can write a song. You can learn to play music. You can learn to paint pictures and people will buy it. You can learn to do many things. You can have a store that sells photographs or sells pictures, or have a dance studio that you own. This is the kind of thinking that we have to give to our children, because the whole scenario of work is changing. It's not the same as it used to be. You need to have skills of some kind, and you need to want to do something. Right now, in the community of Happy Hill, there's a hopelessness that I have to face every day, not only with the children, but the parents. And so part of our getting to be an entrepreneur has to start with thinking, I can do this. I am whoever I am, and I'm worth something. You can't be an entrepreneur if you don't have those values first. So that's what I'm kind of working on as it relates to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then Ms. Clifford, you were in education for years, but then after retirement, you're now still kind of working in the educational field.
Well, I'll back up. I came to Winston-Salem to go to college. I went to Salem and never left. I met my husband, who was at Wake, and started out my career first as a teacher, as you mentioned. And then we started our family. We had 4 children in quick order. And my husband's business, he had started a business. He built sailboats here for 10 years. Talk about being an entrepreneur. No water, right? But he built class sailboats. We raced all over the United States. I was his crew to demonstrate the sailboats. And that went very well for about 10 years. And then there was kind of a double blow, a 2-pronged blow. There was a petroleum shortage, which meant that fiberglass products were in short demand. If you'd been around at that time, there were long lines at the gas stations trying to get gasoline and so forth. It was that period of time. And it was also a recession going on at the same time. And my husband had just brought out a newly designed cruising sailboat, sunk a lot of money into it, and had multiple orders waiting. And people called and said, stock market is just tanked, I had to cancel my order. So the business went under. And there we were with 4 little children. And so somehow I had to be sure that, and this was where I first got interested, I think, in early childhood, not only in terms of watching our children grow, but in learning how expensive it was for parents to have any way to care for their children. If I had gone back to work full time at that moment with 4 children, 6 and under, I would not have made any money because it would have all gone into somebody taking care of them. So I started freelance writing, and that was my first dipping of my toe into entrepreneurial efforts. I did advertising writing for 3 or 4 years, and then the company that had used me most went out of business, and about that time I was asked to come back to teaching. Anyway, I know some of the questions had to do with lifelong learning, so I went back to school again, got a master's, and did school counseling for a while. And in the meantime, I started looking. My lifelong interest has really centered around children, education, and family. I believe those are linchpins in terms of how a community is going to survive and how our country is going to survive. So I went back for yet another degree, got a PhD in child development and family relations, and started a home visiting program to go in and work with parents. I had 2 neighborhoods, Kimberly Park and Ardmore. And the parents asked the same questions, but one set had resources and the other set was really struggling economically. But everybody loved their children and wanted their best for their children. So it was a wonderful 2 years of boots on the ground in terms of being out in the community. Well, I missed one thing. My first job was a summer job here while I was in college, teaching swimming at all, and coaching swimming teams in all the different swimming pools. East Winston, West Winston, Louisville, it didn't matter. I had to go to all of them. That's where I learned my way around Winston-Salem. I was a new bride. I had just finished college, and here I was going all over town. So visiting in the homes was another window into seeing what was really going on in people's lives. And because of all of that, I then became involved and was asked to be the first director of the new Smart Start nonprofit. I don't know if you remember when Governor Hunt started Smart Start for birth to 5 early childhood systems work. You had to have a new nonprofit in any community that received Smart Start funds. This fine gentleman was one of my mentors in that effort because he was on the board, and as was Nigel Alston. Those are 2 of my heroes in terms of my early days as being a new nonprofit director. And we were doing systems work in early childhood education, family support, and health. I did that for about 8 years and grew the nonprofit. So that was a very entrepreneurial period of time. In fact, one of the privileges I had was to go up to Harvard for a week of very intensive nonprofit management training, which was fascinating because the people were from all over the world. They are learning about how to make nonprofits grow. Anyway, when I left that job, supposedly retiring, actually what I did was to get a national consulting position. And so other states, believe it or not, we're trying to look at North Carolina and say, wow, what is North Carolina doing? We were the only state that was trying to take sort of a systemic perspective to early childhood and recognize that it wasn't just what happened at a child care center. It was what happened at home. It was what happened in terms of health. It was what happened in terms of mental health. That all of those pieces somehow needed to be worked together. So I was very fortunate to work with, I would have 2 or 3 year contracts to go in and help states try to get their efforts off the ground at both the state and local level. So I worked with Colorado. I worked for about 3 years. I worked with Michigan, with Virginia, with Alaska, with Oklahoma, a little bit with Texas. That was an interesting experience. And that was still more learning about, because I was an entrepreneur developing a consulting business, having to figure out what that meant in terms of getting the right permits, the right licensing, the right tax ID, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a little bit. And then about, I guess it was about 2017, maybe 16, I decided it was time to just totally re-engage in the community. And I guess my first thing there was to chair the board for Influence Caters, and then later some of the other boards that you mentioned. And more recently, it's been doing a lot of work with refugees. And I realized we needed a systemic approach there too, so we started a Refugee Advisory Council to try to look at the whole picture. And we decided from the beginning that anything we learned working with refugees was really what we needed to be doing with people who lived here all their lives that were struggling. So that's a little bit, that's probably more than you wanted.
Okay. Dad came here and my mom came here when they were 11 years old. Dad had polio and on Ellis Island had to be carried in a bed to get to the island. From that beginning, neither one spoke English when they came. Neither one completed high school. My dad's value system to me and my brother and sister, who were younger, was health was number one, because without it, you got nothing. And number 2 was education. And so almost 80 years later, that's where I have focused all of my career. We left Jersey, believe it or not. I was only about 4 then. We moved to Tennessee, the mountains of East Tennessee, a little town of 800. No accredited schools, 1 school building. Mom and Dad, 2 of us. Dad was starting a textile mill to avoid the unions. 22 years later, we were unionized because they stated that that was a Bible Belt in Tennessee, and they used it as a revival across the street from us to organize our workers, because that was allowed. But from the standpoint, I helped Dad. I remember helping Dad and watching him start the business. He was a late textile worker on the machine in Jersey. Mom was Irish, magnificent Irish, and taught me about relying on our intuition. For males, that's sometimes very hard. Express our views and feelings, etc. I didn't attend accredited school until I got to college. And in order to go, I was a dorm counselor, the old telephone operator where you had to block pools. And I joined the ROTC so I could have room and board, and I worked in a hash house. Fast food place, called them hash house. And as soon as I graduated, I took a course in every single school at the university. I loved to learn about everybody else's interest. And the Army said, what are you going to do during the summer after your graduation? And I said, I'm going to work, make money. I had been accepted into Harvard Law School. I always wanted to be an attorney. And they said, yes, you are going to work. Come in, because Vietnam, and they needed officers, so come on in. So 3 years after that, I went back to UT, and I had interviews. I was fortunate enough to have interviews. They liked my 3 years of Army duty as an officer with my college education. And I came to RJR, and I was interviewed at Smith Reynolds. And I loved the people. There were about 8 of them. I still remember them. And I thought, if they make me an offer, I'm going to come. But I made it conditional. RJR was the year that, by the way, it was in '67 when I came. And so they had gotten kicked off TV. They were the largest advertisers. I said, what are you going to do with money? And they said, we're going to acquire all kinds of businesses. I said, send me. If you'll send me, I'll come to your company. And nobody in Winston wanted to travel anywhere else, trust me, from RJR. So I got it. And so we started a Chinese frozen food business, believe it or not, in Ohio. And so they said, would you like to go? I said, oh yeah, man, would I. And I did. And then we bought a maple syrup company up in Massachusetts. So then I went. Then we bought a little wine company. Don't ask me why, but we bought a little wine company. So I went there. And then we bought a golf course management company. So I was there. And then a perfume, because we were going to perfume smoke, make it for second-hand smoke. So I did that for many, many years. And then when I got ready to retire, my first mentor was Fred Husen. Won't mean anything to you. A very fine gentleman, high school education, but his education was immense about life and people. And so he got me involved with Goodwill Industries in my second year here. And since that time, I've served on 200 nonprofit boards. But during that years with RJR, I kept looking, serving. It's where I learned marketing. It's where I learned branding. It's where I learned advertising. It's how I learned the finance when you start up and all the strategic planning and all the other good stuff. And so I thought when I got ready to retire, I wonder if the nonprofits could use those. I was fortunate at RJR. I didn't need any money for the rest of my life. And I thought, I could do what I want free, give back, and still continue growing. And so that's what I've done for the last 22 years. I have served, according to Wake Forest, they asked me to list them all at once. And I started listing, and we got up to 200 nonprofit boards that I served on. But I do about 150 nonprofit. The reason I and I was fortunate, I've been blessed. When I came out, that's when nonprofits, the governments were turning more and more of human service over to nonprofits to get it out of their budgets. And so I thought, first thing I learned was nonprofits have this, and thank goodness that they do, but they have none of this. They didn't perceive it. If business was a nasty word, I'm not going to run it like a business. And I kept saying, it's not a nasty word. Think of it as the art of the possible. Are you interested as an entrepreneur? Think of yourself as an entrepreneur, which many were. And I said, think of it, would you like to serve a broader audience, more people? Yes. Well, adopting a little business to it will allow you to do it. So why wouldn't you? And I've got 34 years and I want to share. So you have to do different terminology, you got to sell it differently. So that's what I've been doing for 22 years. I have had a blast. I even, just to add some humor, I hope, I even did a startup mortuary in the eastern part of the state for a very large church where the folks had to drive to 170 miles one way for the first mortuary. So they decided for their congregation, which was huge, they would start a mortuary. So I got to dabble with the entrepreneur and help them there, and I had a blast. And I've never regretted it since. But I did learn. RJR, like most companies at that time, were siloed. You never want to cross. And I insisted that I don't cross them. But I actually learned, my boss told me you won't be allowed to, Mr. Goodwill. So he said, the way to learn it, Carl, is get into the nonprofit sector and learn it there. And so, like I say, I learned my marketing, my finance, my operations of all different kinds through the nonprofit sector. I used it as my entrepreneurial college. And now, then when I retired, I said, I will give back. And I've never, I've been here since 67. I did, for 1 and 2 year periods, I lived in and worked in 14 countries. And then Toronto, San Francisco, Houston, Newark, New York, Atlanta, but always came back. I had married a native young gal, and we're still married after 43 years now. But it's a great area. And the nonprofit sector, most people don't realize it's the third largest employer in the state. Our impact is significant. And you meet the greatest people. They keep you humble every minute. I just want to share one other. When I was on the board of the food bank, we started, I remember calling to the board, we started talking about it, and it was right up my alley. They wanted backpacks for elementary age kids. And I said, what's the purpose? And it's to provide them food over the weekend. And I remember I said, I would like to spearhead that. So we did. And I remember we went to the first school, had about 3 rows of kids that we could help at that point. And one young man is tall, I'm not tall, but he's about this tall. And he came up and hugged my legs, crying like a baby. It was the first time that he would, I still get checked out, that he was going to eat in 1.5 years on the weekend. And his first comment was, I'm going to share it with my little sister. That was his biggest. And he apparently got on the bus. He was the last person on the bus route. And we got a letter about 3 weeks later from a bus driver, school bus driver. She said she cried the whole trip and her car ride home because he kept coming up about every 15 minutes. Say, see my backpack and all this food, and I'm going to share it with my sister. And she said, you have no idea how many kids you've helped. And I can tell you a bunch of them. But it's happening now. And your self-esteem just goes, like this. Children to me, my wife and I couldn't have them, but man, I adore them.
And one of the things that I dislike is the word nonprofit, because it's a tax status,
Yes.
and it lets people know. And so when people ask me about Venture Cafe, when they're signing in, I say we're a nonprofit, we use this information for grants, and then they're more likely to fill out the survey and thank you. But it's a community benefit organization.
Yeah,
We need to change the name officially in Winston-Salem, because there's over 400 in Forsyth County,
Yes.
and all doing wonderful individual things. On December 12th, just a quick plug, we have a lot of pitch nights where entrepreneurs pitch their business here. We're doing one for nonprofits, where they get to pitch their business and essentially tell about their nonprofits. They'll have tables out front, but we're offering our tip jar money for a month to that nonprofit, and we'll have some additional funds for everyone who
Well,
participates.
thank all of you for doing that too.
But yes, the fillers of the jar, so be generous with the tip jar. But they are so incredibly valuable in this community, and they take on some of the hardest topics and work with some of the most needy audiences. So, if you could, it's so difficult to choose between food insecurity, because, oh yes, I believe in that, or education, oh yes, I believe in that, or, how do I make my neighborhood better? A lot is the backpack program has grown so much. WFDD has a whole program dedicated to the backpack program. Hope of Winston-Salem now delivers foods to neighborhoods on weekends, because a lot of times when you're sharing that food with your little sister, the food's gone by Saturday morning. So, each one of the 400 in Forsyth County has some amazing impact in their own way. And so my next question is, obviously you've been in Winston-Salem for a long time, what are some, beyond, brighter lights downtown and, factories turning into innovations centers, what are some of the things that Winston-Salem has done really well over the last, say, 20 years?
I think Winston-Salem has really got a lot of vitality now, and is growing in some fascinating ways. When I was in Salem, and I came here in 1959, when you walked out of the door, what you smelled was tobacco, and it was Reynolds and Haynes and some furniture businesses, and that was kind of it. And what I've loved watching over the years is that when one area begins to diminish and go away, some of our, when Wachovia left, that was a psychological blow to the city, because Wachovia was founded by Moravians, Wachovia Bank. And so every time something left or reduced its number of employees, it seemed as though something came to take its place. I have sensed a tremendous explosion of entrepreneurial thinking, of activity in the arts, and part of that is having 4 children that are immensely different. One of my children is Carrie Clifford, who started Camino Bakeries, and that's an incredible entrepreneurial story that grew out of grief, because she lost a child, and the child had special needs and tremendous hospital expenses, etc. And she was baking out of home, trying to sell stuff because she couldn't be at work. She had to be at home with this child. Errol. And she walked the Camino Trail when she was recovering from Hodgkin's in her early 20s. So that's where the name Camino comes from. One of my daughters is a teacher who has taught in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and now is back in Winston. I have a son who is a rock musician and composer, Jay Clifford, with John Little Children, and I've watched the music business has changed. has become very entrepreneurial. And the latest iteration of that is that the band reassembled. They took some time off because they were married and had children and didn't want to be doing 200 gigs a year and all that stuff. And Jay was doing arranging and writing songs and bringing out his own records. But then they got back together to do a reunion tour, and it just exploded and took off. And now they have this online thing. Have you ever heard of Patreon? Okay, so they've got over 300 people that have signed up to be Patreons, or I would have said patrons, that get sneak previews of the new music, or get to listen in on rehearsals, or get various benefits based on the level at which they subscribe. Now that's a whole new entrepreneurial approach for musicians in terms of how to make a living. And then I have a son that's a missionary that went down to the Dominican Republic and started a camp for Young Life and has grown that camp and now has all Dominican staff on the camp. So watching them has been an education because each of them in one way or another have found their own niche and their own entrepreneurial strength. But I see that in Winston-Salem. The changes in downtown have been phenomenal. The arrival of Aperture, for those of us who like a different kind of film experience. The restaurants, the explosion of restaurants. So I've really enjoyed it, but the nonprofit world is where my heart is, like Carl said. When I came to Smart Start, we had contracts because we were supposed to send money out to do various things for children and families and work with partners. So partnership has become really important to me. And what I found initially was there was a lot of turf, a lot of worries in the nonprofit world about who was going to get the money from whom, how would you get donors if somebody else had them, blah, blah, blah. And bringing people together, and I learned that nonprofits were not very good at business. And so we started providing trainings to know how to do good budget work, to how to do good marketing, how to do evaluation that really captured impact. That was an incredible growth experience for me as well as the others. So now, whatever I do usually involves partners. The most recent example of that, my church has something called Faith in the City. It's really the idea that if you believe, I grew up hearing that verse, from those who are receiving much, much is required, okay? So we have looked to say, where can we be active in the community? And we have focused on equity and education. And we have a speaker series focusing on that. It's gone on for a year. And to start this year off, we invited about 30 or 40 other partners to join us and figure out how we could bring Nicole Hannah-Jones here. So she was here, has it been 6 weeks or so now? A dynamite investigative reporter from New York Times. That could not have been done by one entity. I mean, the price tag, for one thing, was significant. But sitting around the table, and that's where I really got to know Chuck Fong with Love Out Loud, and to see. So they now have a new technological approach to hooking people up. If you aren't already part of their Pathways effort, get on there, and it's trying to ask you, where's your passion? Where's your talent? Where's your interest? And we'll help you find a place to put it to use in the community. That's what I love about Winston-Salem, is seeing some of that stuff take off.
The other thing, too, as entrepreneurs, what I'm seeing in the nonprofit sector, grant money's drying up. People's ability to give large donations is tougher. And so what we're working on now, and I knew for the next several years, is what we call earned income. And they're looking at entrepreneurial ideas to bring in so they can control the income. And there are no strings attached to that income like grants do and everything else. So it can go 100% into the services and or if they need some operational needs. So I'm interested in the entrepreneurial, but from the nonprofit sector executive directors or chief executive officers. In fact, they're getting the titles, adopting the titles, chief executive. I just don't want them to go all the way to business, but nevertheless, so earned income, and you will find them start attending entrepreneurial sessions. So don't get concerned at trying to take your business, but they are interested in earned income. And I think it's a healthy
Yeah.
thing.
And it's a great mindset to have that entrepreneurial mindset where you're looking for a new idea, a new way of taking something that's new or existing and making it better.
That's right. Those who travel to Asia and Europe, South America, their economies, yeah, they might have some big government groups and what have you, but the bulk of it is the entrepreneur, the small business. This is the future for America.
And I'm told it let all three of you, but you said that you traveled around the world. Is there something that you saw in your travels that would be of a benefit, maybe that an entrepreneur in this community could do that you said, oh, that's an amazing product or service or organization or idea that you saw either in New York or overseas or something that Winston-Salem might benefit from?
First, I'd like to say that the Happy Hill Neighborhood Association, or the Happy Hill area, has presently been awarded a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts for, I think, $150,000, something like that.
Wow.
And we're now negotiating for a matching grant for the restoration of the Happy Hill Neighborhood Association, neighborhood period. It's interesting that you live in a totally different world than I do. You see Winston-Salem is growing and it's wonderful and it's downtown is sparkling and business is growing. I live in a totally different world. We are struggling. I know very few entrepreneurs who are successful. Maybe I just don't know them. They're probably out there. There are some successes. But there's a big gap somewhere between the resources, the money, rentals, the banks, and the Black people especially, but that also is for white people. But I can't speak for them. I can only speak for Black people. And that is something that we need to look at. Mm-hmm. Why do you need a program and when you have the backpack that you got to take home money, food for the weekend in one of the richest small cities in North Carolina? There's lots of money here. Why would that happen here in Winston-Salem? And in 2019, 2006, or whatever year that was? Maybe that would have happened when I was born in 1931. But here's 70 years later, you're having children have to go home with a backpack for food on the weekend. Why? There's something wrong with that picture. The parents, are they not earning enough money? Are they not? They've been going to school all these years. The schools have been open. Everybody goes 20 years to the schools. And when you get out, you can't earn a living more than fast food. Something else needs to be done here besides the bright lights and new restaurants and Black Theater Festival every other year. And there's something wrong with this picture. Mm-hmm. It sounds great. Oh, it's wonderful. I can benefit from it because I lived in another culture and I'm able to come back here and fit into almost any culture I want to. But I'm just one. I look at my people who live in my community. They are sad. Mm-hmm. They're uneducated, not uneducated, but not properly educated, not properly acculturated, I believe is the word. They lack so much. They can't even come here. This is free. You see any other Black people here? Why? Mm-hmm. It's just down the street. There's something wrong with this picture that we're not looking at. It's not a lack of money. There's plenty of money here. But there's a disconnect somewhere about people, about caring about people. My family, my grandfather was a tobacco farmer in Summerfield. My uncles worked in the R.J. Reynolds and my aunts factories. That generation, we're not benefiting from all that sweat and blood that they gave to these factories. Now they're condos. We're not living in it. Very few Black people are living down here in downtown. Why? Something is wrong.
Do you have any hypotheses?
Hypotheses?
Where does the impediment lie in?
It lies in education. It lies in the will to do for you what I do for myself. It lies in our interpretation of what our religion means, what it is, whether it's Catholic, Muslim, Jew, I don't care what it is, what you believe in. How does it relate to your everyday dealing with people? There's a big gap somewhere. In the religion is a gap, in the education is a gap, in the economics is a gap, and we're always on the downside. That's what I'm 80-some years old. I should not be seeing this today. Why?
Well, and one of the things about a lot of these large corporations that we had, 70 years ago, like Reynolds that came in the 1910s.
Yeah.
And then all of these giant, beautiful factories used to be filled with 10,000 factory workers working 3 shifts. And when those factories closed, that was multi-generations of families that lost their jobs all at one time. So, and Reynolds had a lot of nepotism. Like, oh, my mom works there, my uncle works there, my grandfather works there. And when those factories closed, my brother lost his job, my uncle lost his job, my grandfather lost his job. So it's not like, oh, I lost my job, I can go, live with my parents. A lot of millennials will do that. A lot of 50-year-olds will do that. There's many generations living within households now. That was devastating to this community when the factories shut down for, Haynes has one manufacturing plant open in Winston. The corporate headquarters is still here. But, you need a college degree to work there. You're not working in the mills anymore. That was one of the things that built our community in the in the Old Salem area and in the downtown Winston area. So I think that was the beginning of kind of that downfall of when you are putting many family members all at one time losing their income, where do you go? And what do you do? And you only needed a high school degree or not even at that point. So, John?
I don't want to hijack this, but a big change happened in the 80s, which is there was a thing called stakeholder capitalism, and which switched to shareholder capitalism. So the stakeholders would be the employees, the stockholders, the community, everybody who had a stake in the operation was considered by management. It was part of their reason for existence. Consider all these stakeholders. Now, there's a big argument over in the 80s and they came down on the side, the economics community, the financial community, came down on the side that the only people you have to serve are the shareholders. And if you have to pick up and leave the community and everybody loses their job, too bad. Your only job is to take care of the shareholders. Big shift in terms of values occurred in the 80s among the ruling class.
Well, and then, even late 80s, early 90s, when Reynolds had the buyout, and a lot of people instantly became millionaires because they had shares, but they didn't have financial literacy, and a lot of people, that money went fast for a lot of people. But yes, there is a break.
What happened, you said, when the shift came, when we lost the Reynolds, when they left, what happened to your uncle and your aunt and those people in your family who were out of a job? Just as our people who were out of jobs. They survived. Most of the white people survived, and they were able to pick up and move on. We weren't able to do that, and there was nothing. We are coming from slavery, so we didn't have that kind of background that we could just pick up and move on to the next whatever it was. And there does not seem to be consideration for, when we ask for something for those kind of people, they say, oh, well, you want more. No, we're all equal. No, we're not all equal. We give to everybody the same. No, you shouldn't. We need more in a different way. We don't want to get rich, but we need to be educated to a point where we can be all level. That's the same thing happening now. We're not getting what we need to pull us up into the society so that we can be contributors on the same level. We're always scrambling, scuffling, just barely able to make it. Whereas that same person who was born the same year I was, if they're white or if they live in, maybe they had an inheritance. We had no inheritance, no money. So that is not being addressed. That's what I'm still seeing. And when you make these shifts, and you don't address the fact that these are black people who were slaves. They had 300 years of ignorance.
And discrimination.
And that never ended. It's still on.
There was a GI Bill in World War II. A lot of people bought houses, subsidized by the federal government, but a lot of black people could not buy a house because banks would lend in their neighborhoods, and they wouldn't be, and the restrictive covenants wouldn't let them buy in white neighborhoods.
That's right.
So they didn't participate in that big increase in wealth based on being invested in your own house. That happened for white people, didn't happen for black people.
Well, and redlining still happens.
Yes,
Yeah,
but it's not as bad as it was. But this is the reason why a lot of the net worth of white people increased because of the increase in real estate values, and many black people were not able to participate in that because of redlining and because of discrimination.
I would really encourage you, and I apologize, I didn't mean to imply that everything's rosy. I understand. But part of what I see happening that I'm grateful for is that I think some conversations are going, there's some momentum in the fact that it is way, way, way past time for us to deal with the wounds of slavery, the wounds of Jim Crow discrimination, and get honest about it and figure out how we're going to bring not equality, but equity. Equity. And so I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't done it, to go through the Racial Equity Institute training. It's a 2-day training. You can get scholarships through Names for Better Neighborhoods to go. And that's where the history gets unpacked about things like the GI Bill, fair housing, Social Security, who benefited from that initially. There was a whole layer of stuff that helped white people, because my family came from low-income areas, but benefited from a lot of those programs that gave us a boot up or a foot up that wasn't available to a lot of people of color. The other thing I'd recommend, one of the things I've done for years, I've taken a 6-month sabbatical from it, is to do intake at Sunnyside Ministry, or you can do it at Crisis Control. The thing about that was it kept me in touch with the real life of the people I interviewed every week. Finding out, I just had one afternoon a week where I went in and did all the intake interviews. And I got to hear the stories of what was happening and what was keeping the door closed, what was making it so hard to climb back up and to get out of the poverty pit. So that's another place I would suggest.
A large part of that, too, is why we have the explosion of non-profits. Because they're dealing with it every day. And when you serve on a board in a nonprofit, pick whatever interests you the most, you see these folks and you can talk to them. They're very open. And as soon as you at least demonstrate non-verbally a little empathy, and that you are truly interested in talking with them in hearing what's bothering them. But I get concerned with the nonprofit sector, the crunch of needs is so huge in our community. And they deal with it every single day, 24/7. So they need a lot of encouragement. They need a lot of new blood. But we don't see the corporations increasing the dollars to the community in those sectors. You don't see the governments increasing in those sectors. And so we're putting an awful burden on the nonprofit sector to fill that gap.
There was a ray of hope, I think, in the Foresight Tech Incubator Challenge that was here at Venture Cafe.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Because about 2/3 of the participants in that challenge, numbers were roughly 11 to 13 people competing for funding for that challenge, were minorities.
Yes.
It was significantly more minority than Caucasians. Having come to Venture Cafe, I've met a good number. This room doesn't represent it well, but I've met a good number of African Americans that are starting businesses,
Yes.
and they're taking emotional sustenance from the group of people here. So I hope that what you're witnessing, that there are seeds of change emerging, I hope.
Yes, I hope so too. Part of the money that we've just received has afforded us a strategic plan. We met with the strategic plan for the first time this week. And one of the things he said is that we listed all of the different, the bank or the organizations, management organizations that are dealing with Latino. And he said, now you got all these things on these names, these companies, and the city was on there too. What we have to do is find, it's interesting that my friend and I were discussing the same thing. We have to find a win-win. You gotta find a way for those people who are keeping the door closed to win and for us to win. And they gotta realize you can't win if we don't win. But if you do, it's not gonna be permanent or something that's gonna be tainted or corrupt in some way. So we just have to find a way to be honest with each other and to work for both good, the good of the whole community, not just say it. We always say it's for the whole community, but that means for the white community. We have to work so that it's good for all of us. Because if we don't all, what is it, Martin Luther King said something about if one doesn't succeed, we all don't succeed. So that, I'm hopeful too, that, yes, sir. Somebody.
Well, I just wanted to say how Venture Cafe actually, we have a clothing startup called Supana that's run by two former WSSU students that left to pursue that company. Every product they've ever made sold out almost immediately. And I did video work and photo work for them for a while. And they come with me and said, well, you know, we want to do this idea, we want to do this idea, we did a couple. And I said, you don't need me to do this. You can do this. You can take the skills that you have and the passion that you have, and like you can knock it out of the park. And he took it, ran with it. And to sometimes it's that from the nonprofit side, sometimes the best thing that can come out of it is that push to go, just go, like make it happen, like throw some gas on the fire and say let's do it, let's rev it up and go, and that's been huge to see that.
We've got to really look at what's happening to our children. I mean, for our city to have 30 to 40% discrepancy for racial minorities or ethnic minorities in achievement scores is a crime.
Yeah.
And I don't have a simple answer. It's multifaceted. It's not all in the school. Some of it's coming before they get to school.
Yes, that's true.
But one piece of it is because we're dealing with the legacy of all these years of discrimination and starting with slavery, but all the years since then. If you lose hope and don't believe in yourself, you said that, then you're not going to succeed. So part of what we have to do is to help, especially children. That's where my heart is. Helping children know you can do. You've got incredible talents and abilities. Don't let anybody tell you differently. And to help people start believing in themselves, whatever age they are. So that then they can capitalize on whatever opportunities come along. Because if you don't believe in yourself, you don't feel like you can even seize an opportunity when it comes. So I don't have an easy answer, but we've got to pay attention to the children and to fixing that. And so I'm hopeful about our new school superintendent. I'm hopeful that there are at least some of the right conversations going on. I'm hopeful that the Winston-Salem Foundation has decided to put their focus on two things: educational equity and an inclusive economy. I mean, those are two linchpins for this community to be transformed into something different for everybody, I think.
I think too, you entrepreneurs, piggybacking on what both women have said, your passion, your belief in being able to create an enterprise, talking with younger folks and children about why and what you experience and what causes you to keep pushing on that would go a long way for them to see their talents and to understand that they're the captains of their own destiny. They can be.
And we need to advocate. I mean, schools need to offer art and music and science, as well as science and math.
Yes.
Because some people, that's where their talent is. And a lot of those programs have gotten cut. So we need to be the advocates who are raising a ruckus about it.
And I do believe that you folks are collectively will be the largest employers in Forsyth County God willing, before I leave this earth. I truly do believe. And you will ultimately impact equity, probably more than anything that major corporations ever did, because they never really understood. You do. And so, if you want to dream, I love to dream. I just know you got to put work clothes on your dreams. And so, but you're in that position to truly impact. And I think our history of our community will rest with you and folks like you. I truly, honestly believe that.
Well, there's no, as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you start off with a 9-to-5 job and then you have a side gig that becomes, eventually you have that jumping off point where that becomes your full-time job. And, you get inside your own head and you get frustrated. And one of the best things that you can do is help another person to clear your mind and make you feel better because of these 400 nonprofits in this community and these neighborhoods in this community that could use your help. And it's not just established nonprofits. There are neighborhoods and neighborhood associations and other groups that you can look to and look for. Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods would be your resource for looking for neighborhoods to help, and nonprofits. But, and Love Out Loud and, looking to these different groups. But, I always felt good growing up, Thanksgiving, going and serving Thanksgiving dinner to people. That was something that my parents instilled in me. It's like, you know what, they're hungry every other night of the year. Mm-hmm. So when you're saying, like, don't just think of the holidays as the time for giving or for giving back, try to find, as you're starting a business or thinking about the business that you're already in, whether you work for someone else or you're starting to think of a social enterprise part of your business, that that is part of your business's mission to serve one of these 400 community or members or neighborhoods in this community, so that they are aware that you become that champion, you become that person. So I want to open it up. I have a list of questions, but your questions are probably better. So I do want to open it up for, the next, as long as it takes. If you have questions for our panelists, please ask.
A lot of these things are dependent on huge systemic patterns. Like the whole austerity consciousness. There used to be wealth, now there isn't. They're saying that funds are being cut to park programs, funds are being cut to nonprofits, because everybody feels like they don't have any money. There are people who have lots of money. But the people that used to be giving had all their money sucked out of their pockets and relocated up the pyramid. And this is a bad trend. It affects everything, no matter what race you are. But it may make that situation worse, because it makes everybody hurt more, it makes everybody less generous, because they don't have anything to give. And the people that used to be giving to them don't have any money either. So everybody gets impoverished. This is a huge systemic problem. I don't know how you deal with it in Winston-Salem, because I think it's much larger. I know the idea of trickle-down economics, is a big misconception. And part of the proof of that is the $15 minimum wage in Seattle. Those coffee stores thought they were going to go out of business. Not true. They're doing better several years later than they were then, because the money trickles out, it doesn't trickle down, it trickles into the community. And apparently that has made everybody more prosperous.
Don't forget about giving time and talent. The 3 T's: treasure, time, and talent. People say, well, I don't have the treasure. You haven't heard me say treasure tonight at all. I believe time and talent is the greatest gift that you can give, because you give unto yourself for another person's sake. So I'm a strong believer that everybody has the talent to make a difference. And it's not a maybe huge difference like some of us are able to make. On the flip side, every difference counts. And so you have to want to. And, my dad came and I watched him, who didn't speak the language, didn't complete high school, and yet he was pretty darn successful in teaching us values and telling me, I don't ever want to hear you say you didn't have control over your destiny. You make it. Cool. You get out there and you hustle. And so I started working when I was 5. I organized the kids in the neighborhood to help rake leaves, help the women carry in groceries, I did whatever. But I did that through my entire life. I am a better, I think, person of value and spirit. I believe a lot in coaching, sharing. And so we tend to think in treasure. I'm more inclined to think more on time and talent and share and combining it with others. And when you use time and talent, you find you get back much more than you give. And so that builds and mushrooms. So let's not forget those other 2 T's.
Well,
I
I'm not
agree
gonna
with you on
forget
that.
that either, but I wanna say that I think it is a crime not to have a living wage. And that's another piece of advocacy we can feel. For people to work full-time and not make enough to survive is ridiculous in a country like this. And what I used to see when I was still a school counselor is that there were parents that worked 2 and 3 jobs to try to give their kids something. But what that meant was that then they had no time and energy for their children. And so it was a double whammy. I mean, they were exhausted and their kids were not getting the benefit of the rich knowledge and experience that their parents had, or just the sense of how important they were to their parents. Because children don't understand, I'm working 2 jobs for you. What they understand is you spent time with me. You read to me. You gave me a lot of hugs yesterday. The parent is doing the very best they can because they want their children to have what they need and what they think they want. So in our community, it's another piece we can advocate for. And I've forgotten, I think I was in a board meeting this week, and the question came up about whether nonprofits are paying their employees a living wage. And one of the nonprofits at the table was, but another one, this I won't name, very large in the community, was not. So put your money where your mouth is. You know, we got to figure out.
By the way, there are 2 nonprofits in the community for livable wages and advocating and educating. And so if you ever want those 2, let me know. I'm in both.
Yeah.
Because I firmly believe that also.
What are the names of those nonprofits?
One is ABC, Asset Building Coalition. Not to get off into the weeds, but when we talk about livable wage, poverty, intergenerational poverty is more of an asset. Asset. Building assets.
Yes.
And so what we're trying to teach is, we're going to advocate the livable wage, but in the meantime, let's start talking about asset building. And we unfortunately have a big challenge in our county.
That's why the GI Bill business was so devastating. Because if it lets you either get a college education, and again, it was mostly white people that were able to use that, or if it lets you have a down payment for a house, that was an asset that then multiplied over time. So we have to address those things we've done really wrong.
Well, I looked at a program yesterday on PBS. You were speaking about the children. We do have to help the children. They need help. And this program said there's a new organization in Seattle, I think it is, where if a child comes to school, for instance, with lead poisoning, instead of, they do examine the child and do what they can do, but they go to their home and find out, why does this child have lead poisoning? They examine they ask the parents, they examine the home, the walls, etc. They make an investigation. If the child is falling asleep, why are they falling asleep in the school? You got to go to the home. Sometimes you have to help the parents. The parents can't even take advantage of the money that you may give to them because they're sick. Psychologically, many of us are sick. You give me the money, I may just throw it up. You give me the money, I may not know how to budget it or use it.
That's what I mean.
And we need help on that level. Yes, there's an ignorance, gross ignorance in the Black community of things that we should know how to do, and we don't know.
Self-worth is gone.
Huh?
Self-worth.
Yeah, self-worth. We hope. We don't really think, I can't do that. I have offered one of the ladies in my group to go to Society Tech. I can get them in Society Tech. I have the connections. I can't get a group together. I'm having a hard time finding people who would say, oh yeah, I'll go. You think they'd be lining up? No. I've got to knock on doors. I got to do all kind of programs. I got to do a Kwanzaa. We got to do this to get you to come out of that sick place that we're in. It's very sick. Psychologically, Jim Crow, slavery, all the hangings, murders, shooting by the police, all of that we are affected by. So it leaves us ill.
Charities affect you. Charities affect all of us because it's sort of a broken sense of, our sense of charity is broken because we give and we try to pay our guilt off with charity. And when it comes to somebody, we're giving them something that they don't usually give anything in return. Thereby, there's no value there. So if I gave your children some coats, and those children, that's great. I'm giving children, I'm giving coats, I'm giving food. In a society that's healthy, that person who's getting them is going to go, what can I do for you?
Or how can I pay it forward to someone else who needs it?
Yeah, and that's time banks. But it's interesting if somebody asks me, what can I do for you? And I say, no, nothing. I'm saying you have no worth to me.
Well, this is something that has been destroyed in us that has to be rebuilt. I think every school should have a psychiatrist or psychologist to deal with children and their parents.
Yeah.
Because they're
broken.
Yeah, they're broken. Yeah.
Well, there was a gentleman last year, I keep going back to past venture days, but it was one of the days when it was representatives from volunteer organizations. And he was a 30-ish, 35-ish African-American gentleman. And the room was half African-American, half Caucasian. And he basically said, I don't want any help from the Caucasian members of this room. The solution has to come from my residents. And he goes, I am coordinating. He was basically taking the point that you're articulating, the futility, the sense of futility around them, and saying, we have to define for ourselves what better is and commit to get there. And that we've got to prove that we're worthy for taking help from the Caucasian half of the room before, and we've got to understand what kind of help we want so that it can be applied and appreciated and leveraged. And I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he was a really powerful speaker. And he's a community activist in Winston-Salem, and he's trying to address the very futility that you raised. Boy, I hope he's thriving.
I had an experience once. I was got to be good friends with somebody from another community, an African-American doctor who was very involved in smart start circles. And we were talking about, he was a doctor and his brother was a lawyer, and I don't know what else. And he had told me his mom was a single mother. And I said, but he was worried about what he saw now in a lot of housing communities and children that were watching too much TV and so forth and so on. And I said, well, but when you were growing up, because he was about my age, I said, we grew up in Jim Crow years. So what are you saying? Why was it better for you then than it should be now? He said, when my brother and I walked home from school, all the way home from school, ladies would stick their windows out and they said, what'd you make on your spelling test today? You can do better than that. What'd you do on math today? Yeah, I expect you to make 100 on that. He said, our community believed in us, and they taught us to believe in ourselves. And so that's somehow how we have to get that spirit back.
That Winston-Salem, I grew up in that Winston-Salem, but it doesn't exist anymore for many reasons. But we do have to try to create that quality of life again. And that's really our challenge, I think. And one of the things that you were saying is, yes, we want to do it ourselves, but we don't have the finance to create the scenario where we can do it ourselves. When people give us money sometimes, they also give you guidelines. You gotta do it this way. You gotta go there. You can't do this and you can't do that. Sometimes that eliminates people like me because I have a direct connection. I have the pulse of the community. And if I say, I don't think that's very nice of you to give me this, but don't give it to me now. Wait, I'll tell you when to give it to me. They don't want to hear that. She don't want to hear that. She want, I'm giving it to you now, take it now. This is one of the things that's happening now that we're faced up against. We have to find out how, one of the things I liked about NBN was because they gave us the money, they said sign right here and make a report when you finish spending the money. Go and do what you said you want to do. That was wonderful. We were able to do things because it's not always the way it's written on paper. I can write out a grant for, proposal, but it's not going to happen like that. I'm just trying to fill your guidelines. But that's not how it's going to happen when I get that money and get back to the community. And sometimes we're punished for that. So that there's all kinds of things that we have to be more sensitive of.
But
I have a question. Go ahead.
I also think that you said redlining. And despite all of what we're saying in here, that's still a reality because people have power and control. Power of the finances. One thing that's beautiful about Winston-Salem is I moved here in the 70s from Philadelphia. That's my. And Winston-Salem had a beautiful, and still do, Black culture. If you have a beautiful Black culture, your city is going to be dynamic. Mm-hmm. Because you have a beautiful Black culture, because of who we are. What we've given to this culture and this nation, you're going to live a better life. Now, there is a Black elite, a beautiful Black middle class here. When we usually speak about African Americans, we always think all African Americans are impoverished. Mm-hmm. Now, in the community that Amatala is speaking of here, there is more poverty and deprivation. But the middle class in Winston-Salem is also dying. You had the doctors here, you had the lawyers here, the teachers, the executives. If your weakest link is strong, you're going to make it. A lot of what we're talking about is up to the heart. Now, if you're sitting, and I'm not saying anyone in this classroom, in this session, forum, if someone is redlining, that's the problem. The red line. It's not that we don't know what to do as a people. We know what to do. We've been through the educational system. North Carolina has more African American universities and colleges than most other states. I think Texas may beat us out, which means there's an educational mindset. We have beautiful community colleges here. So why are we doing it? What's going on, as you said earlier, Martha? Why are we dealing with the fact that you have to send a child home with a backpack on the weekend?
Yeah.
And this isn't just Winston-Salem, this is nationwide. But we have to get to the red line. That's the problem. That's attitude, mentality. We are culturally conditioned to believe that one group is greater and will always be, and this group is less than. Until we can get rid of that line, all of this is going to be confusing. When we start talking about race, racism, it's a whole confusion. It's just tumbling and tough. We're all in here talking, trying to figure this thing out, and we've been talking and tried to figure this thing out for years.
For years, right.
And we're still talking. We have all these degrees. I'm older than most people in here have a bachelor's degree. And we still can't figure it out.
Well, and that's, another reason why, getting entrepreneurs together that have creative minds and artists together and putting them in the room, kind of trying to come up with creative ways of doing things. So you were talking about time and talent. Well, if you don't have the money, you can create something that can raise money. You can create an event, or you can create a piece of art, or you can create something else that could be a fundraiser or raise money for a neighborhood or a group or something like that. You don't have to have $10,000 yourself, but you can do something that can raise $10,000.
Who can do it? Who can create that fundraiser? Are you saying that the entrepreneur, people like this young lady, or is it people like the entrepreneurs who don't live in our community, but you're going to come over and say, we'll give a fundraiser? They don't do that. And I would love to do a fundraiser. I need a fundraiser right now. How am I going to do it with no money? You got to have money to do a fundraiser. You got to have the food, you got to have the place, you got to have the music, you got to have something. It takes money. I can't do it, or I really want to, I even asked the School of the Arts last week, because they said the same thing. She said, oh, well, you all can have fundraisers and raise some money. I said, no, I don't know how to do that. I want you, since you're at the school and you're giving me the money, why don't you send me someone who is an expert at fundraising and giving those kind of things. Let me work with them. But to do it by myself, I don't know how to do that.
This idea about fundraising, and I'm just listening to the whole scenario here. What is the idea about fundraising that turns people off in our society these days? Are they interested in knowing, well, where's the money going to be used for? So you're saying, well, how do we break this barrier down to what do you use the money for? When you fundraise, what are you specifically using it for? That's what maybe most people are wanting to know.
Well, that depends on, I'm president of the Happy Hill Neighborhood Association. We have programs that need funding. We have the summer arts program, 6 weeks of where we have to pay teachers, we have to buy food, the lunches, we have to take them on trips. All of that costs money. I have a boxing program we just started. We got money from NBN to buy the equipment, the boxing gloves, the punching bags. So to do programs in the community, you need money.
But couldn't the children and themselves, like when I was a kid, I'm 58 years of age,
Yeah.
I can remember going on field trip, and we had to raise the money ourselves. We did car washes, we did things to get the money so that we could compile that money to do these types of things. So
If
can you get the people involved in that?
We've tried that. They won't come out. They don't care. Not that they don't care. They've lost hope. I could say tomorrow, we're going to have a car wash 2 weeks from now and put the date and You think those teenagers will come out there and wash cars? No.
All right, Venture Cafe is going to put together a focus group to figure out a way to do a fundraiser for Happy Hills.
Great. I welcome it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a question. It's kind of a pivot off of kind of the topic. So if anybody had a burning, I want to ask a question as time. So as we're kind of getting to the end of Venture Cafe, I love hearing you guys' stories about kind of where you came from, the frustrations of what the heck happened that we haven't gotten further than we got. Me being in my 20s, looking towards the next 50 years, if you guys were to paint a vision of not what needs to happen or not what did happen, but what in your dream 50 years from now would look like for Winston-Salem, something that our generation of entrepreneurs can aim for. What does that look like to you all?
Wonderful question.
Yes.
When I was in college, I got a summer scholarship to study in Norway. And so years later, I was approached by, oh gosh, I forgot the name of the group out of Chapel Hill. Anyway, they wanted me to lead a group to Norway and for homestays in the sea. And so I gathered all this literature to get us ready to go and to live in people's homes and everything. And I noticed that on the brochures, there was a statement of value that Norway said, "It is our conviction that every citizen in our country deserves a basic standard of living, and we are going to be sure they have that." That would be part of my dream, is that as a community, we said we want every citizen in this community to have, there's a floor below which no one will go. That we will have, we'll always have some variation, but there should be a basic good standard of living. I hope that Carl has already mentioned the power of small businesses, of individual entrepreneurs, of the arts. I wish I could dance. I would love to be able to do that. If you're giving lessons, let me know. So I would hope that the arts are vital. I think we have incredible opportunities here. This is because we have Winston-Salem State. That's a gem. We have Forsyth Tech, we have Salem, we have Lake Forest, we have the School of the Arts, we have Baptist Hospital, we have Nirvana. We have what we need.
Yes.
If we will somehow engender a spirit of community, that everybody matters and everybody has something to give. So that's an awfully generalist statement. It's not a very specific map, but that would be my wish.
I think what you were just saying is really so true. But I'm sort of trying to flip my brain and think about things the opposite way. So what are people going to get from that beautiful place that you just painted that we can have? Because that's the way, unfortunately, we always look at things. We always value it somehow or other. So when I look at, if we have a living wage for people, if people get a chance to go to university and excel at things, what happens is then we then become the America we used to be, which is the America, and unfortunately a lot of African Americans were left out of that whole mess. But
because I was going to say, people, what do you mean used to be?
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Finish your point.
Yes. My point is that people had time to actually use their minds and step out. Now think, if the whole race of people gets a chance to step out and they have time to use their mind, they have self-worth in this world, what kind of value do they add to the United States of America or to anywhere in the world? It doesn't matter. So I think that in a way, we almost have to not say we're helping people, we're getting this level, but instead, what are we going to get back? I hate to look at it from that angle, but what are we going to get back? We're going to actually get a much more successful country.
Yes.
And better than what are we going to get back, like what are the advantages that will be the outcomes of that? So it doesn't sound like I must get something back. It's like,
but that's
how is it better?
the country.
Right, but like how is it?
We'll have a
Yeah,
vital
right.
community. We'll
Yes.
have people that enjoy life.
And there's less
Fewer
crime.
mental illnesses.
We'll have a safer community, we'll have less crime, we'll have
Yes.
happier people,
Yes.
we'll have less
Productivity.
mental illness.
Yes.
You just go down the list.
I think that was a beautiful question that you asked, and being in education, I just retired from Winston-Salem State not too long ago. And I went on Winston students, and all of what you do can do it right, and I hope that you carry this with you for the rest of your life, because I found that it works, and it's a good thing. Do it right and do it fair. And if you're not doing it right, do it with good intent. If your intent is good, you'll be on the right track. If you're a Christian, be a good Christian. If you're a Muslim, be a good Muslim. If you're a Jew, be a good Jew or whatever, because all those values try to reach God. I often say to people, if you're confused about life and trying to get it right, you have to look in the mirror and deal with the man can't look at what would Jesus do. That is the most simplistic thing in all of resolution that we think about and deal with every day. Our character. If you're still confused, try and follow the 10 Commandments. I don't care what religion you are. If you're stuck on what to do, if you say, okay, if I go back to these things, am I on God? I think if you take that with you for the rest of your life and making the decisions that will come before you, whether it's political, family, education, you're going to be all right.
So
No,
I
I
just,
one more.
yeah, and I agree with everything that has been said. As an artist, I would like, and you're future entrepreneurs, am I looking at future entrepreneurs? Please always bear in mind that a multicultural center in your community, wherever you live, is going to help your business because it's going to help the people around you to be more creative buyers, creative neighbors, whatever. But that's what I want now for Happy Hill. I want a multicultural center, especially since we don't have art hardly in schools anymore. We don't have dance anymore. The arts are minimal, but we need a multicultural center where you have dance, music, writing, from beginning, from little children on up. Not I have to wait till I go to college before I can go to in school the arts before I can get art. No, it should be in my community. When I come home from school, I should be able to go across the street to that house over there because that house has everything I need as a child. To learn to draw, to learn to see color, to learn to move. That should start in our communities. You know, as businessmen, you can play a part in that. And that's what I would like to see in the future. The artists needs politicians and they need commercial businesses to support us. We rarely can support ourselves. We don't make enough money. So we need businesses that are conscious of what we do and of the value that we bring to the community.
I actually saw something that I was fascinated. I don't have any details at my fingertips about revitalizing small rural communities through the arts. It was really interesting about how that had brought new life and vitality to little communities and small towns that were sort of dying, and by putting arts in.
Well, if you want to improve your value of your buildings or find the next best place, follow the artists. Because that's what happened to Trade Street. Trade Street was not a place that anyone wanted to go 20 years ago. But the artists moved in because the buildings were cheap, and then they made it beautiful and vibrant, and then it was the place to be. So people wanted to buy condos and houses, and then the artists went to Cranky's and were in a small room at Cranky's, and Cranky's got popular and revitalized, and then they moved to a funeral home over at Clark Brown's Funeral Parlor over on Patterson. And so the artists are resilient, and they will, and so are entrepreneurs, and they will find a place that is inexpensive and something, but they will make it. I mean, Industry Hill is now a music venue, and there is beer, and there's art, and Camel City, goods, and like there's a farmer's market over there. You know, the areas are shifting, and it's because of the artists. Yeah. The artists go there and they make those communities better. So what we need is a bigger diffusion of artists to make, not just focusing on the downtown area, but moving into the communities that are a little bit farther out. And it's starting, but we have a way to go. And I think that Christian's question was good of like 50 years where downtown isn't a hub. It might be a central part of downtown, but it's not the hub. It's the place where you can diffuse out to a variety of different places that are thriving and filled with art and beauty and people who are happy. So Last question.
For more for Carl, it's speaking about artists and nonprofits. Both of them often have the same problem because I mean what I do for a living is rather artistic, and I'm also a startup and I'm an entrepreneur. And I have 3 kids, and my wife works. She has the hardest job because she raises our 3 kids. But it's often they have the same problem, which is they're very bad at business. And and this is a question for Carl, is how do you help an artist understand that what they do is worth more than its artistic impact, and that money for art is not a dirty thing, just like business is not a dirty word?
Yeah.
And how do you help? I literally had a nonprofit, which will remain nameless. It wasn't venture capital. It was in contracts talks with a large nonprofit in the area, and they literally said to me, and if you could give us a discount on the price, because, you know, after all, we're only $1 million nonprofit. And I was very gracious about how I handled it, but that mentality of we're only $1 million nonprofit, and it was everything in me not to say, and I'm only a guy trying to feed my family. Like, how do you balance those two things where it's like, I'm trying to run a business, and I'm trying to help you push this thing forward through an artistic medium. But at the end of the day, I have responsibility.
A lot of it comes down. There's no quick, easy answer, obviously. But when I'm asked that, if you ask board members, for example, what's the one thing you don't want to do? It's fundraising. And if you ask them and say, but that's a mandated responsibility of a board. And then the next comment they'll make is, I don't like begging. And I say, well, that's the wrong mindset to begin with. And you will never succeed if that's your mindset. You're not begging. You are asking other folks to join us because we're proud of what our nonprofit does and what we can achieve. And we're asking you to join with us in that, to experience that. But the other critical thing is, I try to help the nonprofits in terms of which sectors are you looking at, which type funders are you looking at, and I'll say, how do you think they think? And they'll say, I don't have any earthly idea. I said, then you won't be successful. Because you are selling yourself and you're selling your art. Period. And you have to know how and what they value and express in those terminologies through the artistic language. Did I communicate that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I see my job is trying to, I have a very difficult time, I will be very upfront. I've been very quiet during all the arts discussion. I have a very difficult time affiliating with arts. First, do I recognize its value on the good aspects of society? You better darn well believe that. So with that, I rely on folks that are in the arts. And I'm gonna help them by seeing what the other folks that aren't in the arts, what they think, what they have to hear to help you. Is that making sense? So I see my advocacy, my involvement with nonprofits of all types in that vein. I love the challenge. of like that $1 million nonprofit. First of all, you have to go in with some assumption that they're not leaping out of their chairs to help. So therefore, why aren't they? And it's how they think and where their priorities are. Then I start saying, okay, what language can I use from my arts perspective, my entrepreneurial perspective, that rings their chimes, that I at least get them to listen to me. I don't want to hear a comment that we're only $1 million nonprofit, when they're looking at me and knowing I'm not even at $10,000. Okay? That comment says to me right off, they have no intention of helping. So I accept that as the challenge. I'm going to change that mindset. And I got to think the way you do.
And I asked that question more for other artists.
Yeah.
I stand firmly with my feet in midair.
Yeah.
As my pastor likes to say.
Yeah.
I understand both the entrepreneur side and the arts side of it. And that nonprofit actually ended up to be one of the largest contracts to date that I had, because I was able to talk with them and help them understand.
Yeah, when I left the business world and I started with the nonprofits, the first thing I thought about is, okay, I could preach all day long about the benefit of business. And those nonprofits aren't going to understand a word I'm saying. And they're going to think I don't understand their world. Right? So I thought, hey, you had 34 years in this corporate arena. And if you aren't smart, you got to know the business side. And if you're not smart enough to know and listen to the nonprofit sector and the words they use and the way they describe things and the way they think, and then tie my business side into theirs language, then I shouldn't start what I'm about to undertake. That was my biggest challenge. And I think I've been somewhat successful over the last 22 years in the nonprofit sector because I speak their language. And I can make them understand that they gotta marry this with theirs. And as soon as they do, and they ask me, how do we do that? I've got answers. See, I'm ready. I just want them to be ready to ask the question. Not me ask the question.
So we need to kind of wrap things up. And it's interesting because like a usual session at Venture Cafe is 50 minutes long, 50. We have talked for 2 hours with 3 people. And originally we had asked, to have 7. And so obviously 2 of our members were not able to make it, but it's just like, how much can 3 people make an impact and make us think and contribute to a conversation, which is one of the reasons why that we will invite the other 2 to come at another time and continue these conversations, because we can learn so much from you who have been there and have done that and still continue to learn and educate other people. And, we hope you come back and serve in the audience to...
I'll use a word the younger folks don't know. These 2 are humdingers.
Yes.
You will laugh, cry, cheer with both of them.
They are great people. And they do have a luncheon. They do the award ceremony in August every year. And if you want to feel good about life, you want to come and listen to these people. There used to be a time limit. I understand, for everyone to give a speech for less than 5 minutes, but that seems to have gone to the wayside from the 2 women that are not sitting here. But it's one of those ways to see like how these people have had an impact and how they have served our community, and how that now they are serving as mentors in the community to help the next generation. I had 20 years to become this. And I will dedicate myself to become this because it is so incredibly inspirational and all they have done for our community. So thank you so much for being part of our evening. We do hope you come back